Second part. The boy fell with a cry from his throat that sounded like he was being strangled, and taking note, the Countess flew over to catch him. She bridged the 15 feet in one effortless bound, yet her action stirred only the slightest breeze. "You saw, didn't you, you foolish lad?" The Countess gazed down at Pick lovingly, but his little face was pale, and his eyes had rolled back in his head. What's more, he began foaming at the mouth, and his body twitched violently. He was most certainly not a cowardly child. To the contrary, at that age he'd already been through more hardship than most adults. And his heart was tough as a dragon's armored hide. That being the case, what was below the pane of glass? "I shall take him to the examining room," the Countess said, looking at the Grand Duke and heading for the door. But just then, the agonized cries that had filled the room stopped dead. Gorshin and Benelli each took a step back and fell to one knee, while the Countess set Pick down on the floor, bent her left arm in front of her chest, and took her dress in her right hand to curtsy in greeting. The giant was just getting up from the sofa, his face caught to mind stone, and two eyes opened in it like fissures breaking wide. The room was tinged red. Though this was due to the Grand Duke's eyes, it was unclear if they gave off that red glow merely because they were bloodshot. "I was dreaming," he said in a voice like rock shaping rock. "Will he give me naught but nightmares for all eternity?" And then his eyes turned not to the Countess, not to the two noblemen, but to Pick where he lay on the floor. Has he come in search of the girl? His guess was precisely on the mark. Let him see her as soon as possible. "Now, Dee, what has become of him?" "Those two fought him and cut off his left arm. However, one of them was gravely injured, and even now the bleeding won't be stemmed." Looking not at Gorshin or Benelli, but at the Countess, the Grand Duke said, "His blade cannot be tamed, even after receiving my blood." "Yes, it's just as I thought. This has become most interesting. He is certain to come here eventually." "Before he does, we shall—" Benelli interjected. The Grand Duke merely shot him an ill-tempered glance before continuing. "Nightmare or not, this is a vision he has given me. It taught me a number of things, not only of the past but of the future as well. Though the message is yet shrouded in mist, it would seem this train will not run smoothly." "Dujidi?" There was no answer. The Countess's eyes turned red, and she asked, "There are other troubles as well, then?" "Perhaps. At any rate, it would seem there was some merit to being awakened, both for me and for you." An expression that beggared description flitted across the Countess's face, one of both pleasure and grief. It was the one she'd found only after millennia of living. "That's fine," the Countess replied, her voice now changed. Glaring intently at Zeno Gorshin, the Grand Duke said, "I shall set him right. Come." He beckoned with a nod. For some reason, Gorshin shook his head. Not only that, but he also backed away, as if he were going to flee. "Damn you for having the heart of a flea, come," The Grand Duke's eyes gave off a red glow. It burned itself into Gorshin's retinas. The young nobleman stood stock still, but coughed as if in one last act of resistance. He spat out blood beads. Benelli groaned and backed away. Their poison was so virulent, it rendered Dee helpless enough for them to lop off his left arm. "Parlor tricks," said the Grand Duke, opening his mouth wide. An incredible wind resulted. The hair of all save the Grand Duke billowed in the same direction. The Grand Duke had inhaled. Every single blood bead was sucked into his maw. Noted the deadly beads burst in his mouth. The Grand Duke's Adam's apple bobbed, as if he were swallowing something. And then he remarked, "That might be sufficient to kill a field mouse." Having said that, he stood before Zeno Gorshin. Grabbing the young nobleman by the throat, he lifted him effortlessly, and Gorshin could do nothing to stop him. The Countess looked down at her feet. Before long, Gorshin was thrown to the floor with a thud, where he twisted weirdly, and then quickly got to his feet. Neither his face nor his physique had changed. However, the pained expression was gone, and his bleeding had ceased. All that differed was the pair of teeth marks that remained in 2 spots on his neck. Gorshin must have felt this full yet incomprehensible recovery, because he twisted his lips into a grin. His expression and the fangs that peeked from the corners of his mouth were the same as before. Yet an entirely different nobleman stood there. "I'm cured, and I've changed," he said in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth, and there was something about it that resembled the Grand Duke's tone. "My apologies for letting you see me in such an unseemly state," he said, bowing deeply to the Grand Duke. "Together with Benelli and Braylo, I will see to it the maggot plaguing this train is eliminated once and for all. We shall set out immediately." "No, wait a moment." "Why, my lord?" Though the wording was cordial, the tone was one of repressed rage. He was infused with a rebelliousness and savagery inconceivable in the old Gorshin. But one roar from a veritable thunderlord swept that way. Silence. In time with his command, the giant's right arm swept out. With a dull thud, Gorshin was sent sailing through the air. His neck bent 90 degrees. However, a split second before he was to slam against the wall. The young nobleman extended his hand and struck a pose as if sticking to the wall, deftly leaping back and landing on his feet in precisely the same spot he'd been standing. The Grand Duke grinned. "Hold. Whether he wants to fight or not, our foe shall come to us." Page break. Braylo suddenly halted. There had been a disturbance to the spiraling madness of his essentially aimless wandering. The latest disruption came from a baseless anxiety and a killing lust. "Rattling," he muttered almost incomprehensibly. He could hear confirmation of that phrase from his back. Somewhere, something was happening that threw his 2 magic swords into a frenzy. "So where am I?" Braylo squinted his eyes. He hadn't the slightest idea of his present location. His unbalanced psyche sought to suppress its madness, and his wandering had been in search of an outlet for his insanity. "So where am I?" he repeated, and a glowing green schematic appeared before his pale and slender face at eye level. for this Braylo was of the same blood as the train's owner. He was at the front of the vehicle, rattling. The demon swordsman of a noble murmured, "Where is he?" And then he began to walk like a phantom. In no time he reached the control room. The look he gave the door that impeded him further progress was colored with madness. Just beyond this, then. In a sense, Braylo was correct. When he took a step forward, a warning howled down at him from overhead. "Present entry card. This is a Class 1 security area. Present entry card. If you cannot present credentials, leave the area." Attack to commence 3 seconds after this warning concludes. 3. Braylo's eyes gave a red glow. 2. His right hand reached for his back. The question was, which enchanted blade would he choose? Blue soldier or gray soldier? 1. From anywhere and everywhere, countless auras of light concentrated on Braylo. A heartbeat later, the light limned new paths, and fire erupted from the ceiling, floor, and walls. See, dozens of ultra-thermal rays had been stopped by Zeno Braylo's twin longsword blades. Not only that, but all of them had been deflected back. The fires all around him were like cries from those stricken. "Impertinence," Braylo spat, and his right arm plunged forward. Before there was time to direct him to a second assault, his blade had pierced the door, quickly shredding it like paper and making an opening large enough for a person to pass through with ease. He must be up ahead. Without hesitation, Braylo's tall form stooped a bit to slip through the door. Ah! There was a reactor in the control room. Who could say for certain that his madness wouldn't be unleashed on it in a gale of sword blades? And more importantly, who did the nobleman mean when he said he was in the control room? Second part end.